I'll be honest, this week's episode of Fate Grand Order had me laughing like a lunatic. This was insanity. This episode they literally just, it left me near speechless. I love how you can bring up, people die when they're killed, or you can have just Lady Killer Eyes recruiting Jaguars because you know what? Why just have a character basically building a harem and not have him acknowledge it? Have him acknowledge it. This episode basically towed the line of, are they pushing it too far and being too absurd, and then also at the same time not being absurd enough? This episode was completely ridiculous, hilarious, and it had me dying. Multiple points I had to pause the episode to catch my breath. I was surprised, to be honest. This anime has made me laugh, but not to the extent that I just did. I just don't even know where to begin with an episode like this. There were so many times that they were just pulling away, letting it be a wide shot as ridiculous dialogue would play. And that was getting a kick out of me in itself, kind of like that classic style of comedy. But just the more we watch, because the episode really at the beginning, like there was some humor, but it actually was looking like 100 people were getting killed, so there was serious as well. So I thought they were gonna pretty much balance out. There'd be some dark and then there'd be some comedy. But by the end of the episode, especially when you realize that this goddess didn't kill anyone, 100 people may have died, but they were immediately revived, you just really look at this episode in hindsight and say, this is complete comedy, and you kind of want to see more. At least I know I do. I just love how you have a character like Fujimaru who usually would be pretty oblivious or really not acknowledge the amount of like googly eyes this man has towards him, as from his servants to just the numerous goddesses and servants that he's been getting. There's a lot of girls who want Fujimaru. Hell, the goddess who is trying to kill you is saying, marry me. No, I'm just joking, and then kind of just runs away because they had their fill. Like, this is what a lot of anime would be, where just you got that like building of the harem both on the protagonist and antagonist side, and then you just don't acknowledge it. So the fact that you had Merlin say, hey, you know what to do, and he started to be all romantic and charming our Jaguar friend, it just like, yeah, I'm gonna be on your side now. It is absurd. It is ridiculous. But I kind of love it, I gotta be honest. It's just, I don't even know. I don't know why it works so well for me. Maybe because you see so many, even with Fate in general, like there's so many characters who just get all the females being like basically thirsting all over the character, and there's no acknowledgement of it, and it almost felt like a parody, but it wasn't a parody. It was a legitimate episode of Grand Order, and that's why I love it so much. And those who have been complaining that they haven't been showcasing a lot of the comedy from the game, I bet are having a heyday with this episode because it was goddamn funny. But like I mentioned, that people die when they're killed line being in this episode legitimately just icing on the cake in a lot of ways. It was so good to see that. And just what I love more, just the very blunt comedy that's really throwing it in your face, or those moments where you have, for a while it was Anna just doing it, but now that Ishtar is a part of the crew, you'll just have these characters kind of looking at the situation, being super serious, and you'll always see those two just not having it whatsoever, very disgusted and rolling their eyes, and it always makes me laugh, especially when you have, Jaguar being like the lolly girl, and she's just saying, kill, kill, kill. Why? Why did they do this? I don't know, but I love it. I love it so much. It just felt, especially when you think like a couple episodes back, we were fighting this giant beast, and now we're just laughing like lunatics and children because of just such simplistic execution of its comedy, but it's pretty fantastic in itself. And I had a bunch of people who, and this pretty much happens anytime I don't bring up every single point of an episode, but like I've mentioned with Fujimaru, he's a character who, as long as you're not trying to kill him, he's not going to really care who you are, which is why Merlin has said, don't reveal your secrets, Anna. And I think it was last week where you have Ishtar sneeze, and then the little illusion and kind of like the switching of personalities, and the image was changing, and I didn't bring it up last week, and because Fujimaru doesn't care. In this episode, there's an even more obvious like, hey, she sneezed and she was about to change but then didn't change. Fujimaru gets a little distracted but then immediately ignores it because Ishtar is a part of his crew. He doesn't really care. If Ishtar wants to say what's going on, she'll say it. He's not going to push for it, which is kind of Fujimaru's character. So I just wanted to mention that because people were asking why I didn't bring it up. That's why. I already kind of brought up what our main character is all about. There's no real point in me bringing up every single moment where he's like, oh, you have a secret, but I'm not going to say it because you're a good person and you trust me right now. It's the same reason with like Jaguar. At this point, this girl is like just on his crew. Even if she has multiple secrets, he's not going to push for it as long as she's not trying to kill him in his sleep, which is what I kind of like about his character, as he kind of owns up to it. And it allows for these situations to just come across as like, you notice something's off, but of course our main man is not going to push on it too much. I really have been enjoying, though, I have to say, just the little glimpses we got of Ishtar and Gilgamesh in this episode. I figured the interactions would be glorious, and the little snippets we got in this episode were top tier. I love how they just poke at each other and really are trying to poke the bear. And you kind of feel like even though, Ishtar's with Fujimaru, and as long as Fujimaru's around, it should be okay. But at any moment, these two are going to fight, it feels like. They're going to explode, and, you kind of want to see it just to see what the hell would happen. Would it be brutal, or would it be more comedic? You really don't know, especially after watching an episode like this. But I have to say, when we get introduced to Cuckoo, I guess is what we're going to call her, the name's insane, but Elite Jaguar had a nice little nickname for her. That was, I love it. I love it anytime you have a character, especially in anime, who, as they're doing vile things, are laughing and acting as if they're just flirting with someone or just having a normal conversation. And yes, the characters did get revived, but in this moment, it was literally just, you killed 100 people, you're laughing and joking about how you want to marry Fujimaru, and literally characters like Mash are being like, I am terrified, and rightfully so. You're looking at an insane murderer having no empathy for what she's doing, and you're just wondering what the hell are you even supposed to do, and I love that. So, like, there was a little bit of animation for action, there wasn't a ton of it, because for the most part, this was definitely a funny episode, but still, the glimpses that we did get, I'm really excited, especially because Fujimaru has such a little mini army going right now. What is that confrontation going to look like? I imagine it's going to be insane, especially because this is a warrior who, diplomacy, words, that isn't going to get through to her. You actually have to fight, and based on what everyone's saying, like Gilgamesh is saying, they are no match for him, and then just kind of sends Fujimaru off to deal with it because, well, I guess that's what Fujimaru's job is at this point in time. It's still going to be insane. You kind of just, every time you get introduced to a character, you start thinking like, okay, this might be how it's going to go down, but at the same time, you start thinking there's an endless sea of possibilities of how insane the carnage could be when these two do clash, and I sort of love that. I probably should have expected it, the whole like Jaguar joining the crew, especially when they're walking through the forest, and she's like ready to fight, being like, oh, I always knew you're gonna come back, and they just keep walking. It's like this most basic art design, and just the more progression of getting mad, like as if you're ignoring. I don't understand why it makes me laugh so much. I really wish I could explain, but I don't know. It is just so, I guess because when you look at characters like, a girl in like a tiger pelt, even though historically characters did that, it's obviously very much anime design. So maybe that's why I like it, when you have such anime personalities and character designs living up to the absurdity that a lot of people, if they never watched the anime in question, would say, oh, that's anime and this is probably how goofy it is. And this episode just kind of let them embrace the goofiness, the silliness, the more absurd aspects before we transition back into having more serious atmosphere where characters actually can die. And this episode did have some serious moments. I actually really like the moment with Fujimaru and Ishtar when they're basically talking once again. And, the last time someone said they were like their first true friend, they ended up dead. Ushiwaka ended up, well, not dead yet, but I guess in his eyes she is dead, but at the same time we know she's going to become something worse than death. So to have someone say that once again, I assume just based on the body language, even though it's like, oh, that actually means a lot, it's actually a terrifying feeling for him, because the last time that happened, just a day later, or a couple days later, you just ended up basically pummeled by a giant goddess of death, this demon Gorgon, right? It's like, it's obviously something that gets to him, and I always like those moments with Fujimaru, just where he's sitting and thinking about how he can't be a failure, he's failed enough, and this is his last shot in his mind. He feels like he needs to own up to this, and every time a comrade, an ally, a simple soldier he didn't know the name of dies, it actually gets to him. And that's what I really love, is even though this episode is like 80% absurdity, you do have those moments that let the characters have their serious moments and really decompress and feel like you connect with them on an emotional level. Even though you are witnessing some of the most absurd comedy you've probably seen this season, at the same time, you do have those personal moments to make it feel like Fujimaru is someone you actually want to root for, not because he's just this like generic harem protagonist. He actually has something worth fighting for, and you really feel like he owns up to his cliches and embraces them, while also doing something completely unique all in the process, and actually is someone that is a memorable Fate protagonist, which you can't always say. A lot of times they are pretty forgettable. You don't always get the, Fate Zero characters. Sometimes you do get those basic bitch characters, but this, I wouldn't say that. I actually think he's a really lovable character who has his cliches, but like in this episode, he owns up to them and it becomes something original and not feeling like just a trope like you might want to say a few episodes back, which is a really nice feeling. I think the more we watch with these characters, especially the larger the cast grows, it's gonna be very fun just for the mix and matches of what characters can interact with who's gonna argue with who's gonna want to fight with who. I mean, you had Ishtar literally shoot the Jaguar in the head because it's like, hey, you told me to do it, but I think that might have been going too far. Like, you can just think of numerous possibilities of all of these servants and just, Fujimaru having to kind of like tiptoe around, bring everyone together so they don't kill each other in their sleep. Like, there's so many ways for this to be amazing, while also being serious on the process, which is kind of one of the best parts of Fate Grand Order as of late. I could completely understand if this episode went too far for some people, because it definitely was ridiculous. The most ridiculous episode we've seen, but I don't know, I feel like with how much absurdity there is on a visual level, it's kind of nice to have an episode where there was some serious moments, but then by the end of the episode you learned the series wasn't all that serious because they weren't actually going to stay dead. I felt it nice to have some of the more anime design things be embraced and actually said, hey, this is very anime, we're owning up to it, and we're not going to just try to pass it off as always being super serious, because some of this is absolute absurdity. And having an anime recognize that and almost parody itself is kind of refreshing, I have to say, especially for a series like Fate, which has so many entries, and you don't get moments like these all that often unless it's a spin-off series where the characters are cooking dinner and things like that. I just thought this was a great episode it has some really great character moments, but a majority of it was definitely very funny, and I thought the simplistic beauty to the art style, especially the animation just going almost chibi in a lot of ways, was the optimal way to make it funny. And I think that's why it was as great as it was for me, because they really went basic with its visuals to let the basic comedy become something incredibly memorable. And when they had to be a little more serious with characters talking and actually thinking about what's at stake, they got that more serious atmosphere down to a T. I really enjoyed this episode, what can I say? It was complete and utter amusement, and I love episodes like these. But I'm really interested for game players. What was this like in the game, and how did it translate to the anime? But whatever anyone is feeling, to let me know down in the comment section below. And if you did enjoy this video, be sure to drop a like and remember to hit that subscribe button if you have been new. So until next time, everyone, please take care. Have a good one.